I first want to get you to react to the Derek Chauvin verdict, but then get us started on the concept of why defund the police is the policy position that you think is got to be the starting point for reform.
So Derek Chauvin case was a trial that, if I'm going to be really honest, I tried to avoid watching. I had so much anger, emotion. You're hurt, you're afraid, you're fearful, you're frustrated, and all those things kind of swirl in together to create that anger and that energy inside of you. And I had so much of that I didn't know how to process. And then came the announcement of the verdict, and there was this void. People were happy and excited, and I couldn't be. And I think it was because I found it difficult to accept that this was worth being excited over. This to me seemed to be the bare minimum. If my life is worth so little that the only way that my murderer can come to justice is by having videotape of somebody standing on my neck for close to 10 minutes, and that deliberation of that trial takes more than 5 seconds, right? To me is nothing to be proud of. And when people hear defund the police, I think there's this rhetoric out there. I know there's this rhetoric out there that makes people feel like there's lawlessness that we want, that we don't want any sort of order or safety. We are separating the idea of safety from the idea of policing. We are saying that safety in and of itself is an inherent concept, that communities have every right to be able to govern themselves. And that for as long as the system of policing has existed, it has been inherently antithetical to that concept of safety for a huge swath of Americans. And so when we talk about defunding the police, I'm not talking about walking up to individuals like Chief Barren and saying, you are an awful person. I want you gone. I want you out of my community, and I want to run everything myself. What I'm talking about is moving funds, is divesting and reinvesting.
Much like John, I had anxiety myself waiting for that verdict to be rendered, because here's my thoughts. Would there be that one or two jurors who spin it into a mistrial after receiving all this overwhelming evidence that Mr. George Floyd was in fact murdered? And so I did have a sigh of relief when the verdict came in that this individual was guilty on all 3 counts. Much like John, the work still has to continue. When you look at the history of law enforcement, there is a history of racism and police brutality. It's a fact. It's not only a fact, it's a documented fact. And so reforms must take place. They must take shape. You need leaders in policing who are courageous enough to make the much needed changes and support those changes. When we have conversations about defunding the police, so yes, I'm not an advocate of defunding the police. Right now, we do a number of different jobs. We do a lot of community efforts. There's a lot of hats that we wear in this business. I believe that the government has money. I see the government spend money on many different things that are really not necessary. And so some of that money should be used for some of the programs. For example, we're starting a mental awareness response where we're looking to hire a medical professional to assist us on those types of calls for service. Because although there are calls for service for a person suffering from mental illness that have the potential to be violent, a majority of those are nonviolent, and we could use a medical professional to assist us in those types of response.
Policing is often something that's emerging as a problem. And sometimes we're trying to hit it back down into the ground or into this field. But one thing that I want us to really be mindful of is that the field itself, this American soil that it's emerging, that this problem is emerging from, is racism. We have had a problem in this country of racism since its inception because things that have occurred in this country have been based on race. Categories of people have been enslaved, categories of people have been stripped of their land, et cetera. So when we look at the American history and our culture through a lens of race, then you're able to understand as these problems emerge, as policing problems emerge, whether it's the entire system of policing or individual cases, because we often also look at a Dante Wright and we try to handle that and we create a hashtag. And then we move to Ma'Khia Bryant. We move to all of these cases that are emerging, but the entire problem of racism is what is feeding this the systemic problem of policing in America and these individual cases that are emerging. So Stephen, I want to say that because for me, it's not enough just to say that policing is a problem. It is. But that people who become police officers are born and raised in a society, in a country that sees people racially and has continued to treat people in different ways.